Tonight, we want to take a closer look at this case and at the cases of other imprisoned journalists around the world. We're joined here by someone who follows the plight of journalists, Joel Simon, Executive Director of the Committee to Protect Journalists based here in New York. Welcome.
Thank you.
The cases of these two young women that are in North Korea and also the case of Roxanna Saberi have received a great deal of media attention. But how often does it happen that foreign journalists are treated this way?
It certainly happens. There are many cases, and they're probably the ones that most people are familiar with. But day in and day out, what we really see is that local journalists within their own countries are the ones who face persecution. They're the ones who are routinely jailed, the ones who face threats of violence, and that's where the real threat to the media is, local journalists working in their own countries.
So we're making a distinction here between international journalists who go to a country and report a story as to the domestic journalist who reports within his own homeland.
Absolutely. And you know, when there's an international journalist who's put in jail or something happens, it becomes a diplomatic incident, there's increased attention, the media focuses on it. But day in and day out, what's happening is that countries, repressive countries, are curtailing the work within their own countries, and they're failing to respond to violent acts, or they're putting journalists in jail, and that's really the greatest threat to the media.
What would you say is the most dangerous country for a journalist to work in?
Depends if you're worried about being killed or about being put in jail. China is the world's leading jailer of journalists, followed by Cuba, Burma, Eritrea. Those are some of the countries which are most likely to jail journalists. If you're talking about violence, there's no country like Iraq. Iraq is unprecedented in terms of the level of violence against the press, perhaps the most deadly conflict in history for the press.
When we talk about, again, those domestic journalists, or even international journalists, what is the story likely to get you into trouble?
You know, we've done an analysis of this. I would say if you kind of look broadly, it's the intersection of money, corruption, human rights, power. It's kind of the sweet spot of these repressive regimes. You know, what keeps them functioning? And if you start poking around in those kinds of stories, you're going to face some consequences.
And what about the advent of the internet? People are blogging these days. Has that changed the dynamic?
Absolutely. What's really interesting is we do an annual census of journalists killed around the world, journalists imprisoned around the world each year. And this year there were 125 journalists in prison, and the largest group worked online. That's the first time we've ever documented that. So it's clear there's an explosion of journalism online, but repressive governments are aware of this, and they're taking measures to limit the kind of journalism that's taking place online.
And very quickly, what are the trends suggesting?
Unfortunately, the trends are not positive. We've seen a sharp increase in the number of journalists killed, the number of journalists in prison. Those numbers have been high now for almost a decade, and bringing them down is going to be a challenge.
Joel Simon, thank you very much.
Thank you.